Good morning. Happy November. We've arrived at the first week in November. It's Monday morning, November the 6th, here in Leesburg, Florida. Welcome to this episode of The Legacy of Handmade Objects. I sort of decided when I started this series that one of the things I wanted to try to do was just kind of bring you along on this journey that I've been on for a while and kind of share whatever's happening at the time that a particular Flosstube is being filmed. And it just so happens that I'm down to a deadline trying to get some weaving done for an exchange that our local guild is having. And I thought it'd be a good time maybe to sit at the loom and do a little weaving and try to talk some about the journey that has been weaving for me. I'm going to try to do a little weaving at some point here and see if I can talk at the same time. If you are watching this, you'll see that it was maybe a little bit of a success. If not, you probably won't ever hear about it because I will have erased that film, but we'll see what happens. Like with many things that have come my way through the years, weaving was one of those ideas that I got in my head long before I knew anything about the reality of what was involved. I often said to folks, I want a loom. I want a great big loom, and I want to learn how to weave, without any idea of what that would involve. But it just so happens that a dear friend of ours at the church that we were attending at the time passed away, and she was a well-known weaver, and her husband decided that he wanted to sell her loom to somebody who would appreciate it. He really wasn't looking to make a lot of money off of it, and that worked out to be a pretty good deal for me. So we went over and looked at it, and I bought this wonderful 46-inch 8-shaft Harrisville loom with a small tabletop loom and a whole batch of stash to go with it, yarns and all kinds of fun stuff. But I have to say, at the time that I bought it, I hadn't a clue what I had bought. I couldn't have told you what the brand name was. I couldn't have told you what a shaft was. I really had no idea what I was getting into. We brought it home. As you'll see when I get to work in here, it's a pretty good sized piece of equipment. And we moved it around from one room to another in the house, trying to find a place where maybe I could learn to use it and where it wouldn't get in the way too much. And that turned out to be quite a challenge in itself. Anyhow, at some point, I got tired of moving it around, and I said, I think I need to figure this thing out. So I looked on it, and it says Harrisville, which gave me a clue. And of course, I went online and figured out that it was made in a little town in New Hampshire called Harrisville. And there is still a company there called Harrisville Designs that not only makes looms, but spins wool and has recreated some of the original industry that was part of that town's founding. So I started looking around to see what connection I could make with them, and it turns out they do have weaving classes. So with some planning and some scheduling, I decided to go up, take a week-long weaving class. I was privileged to work with a man that some of you may have heard the name of, named Tom Gibson, who was teaching the Intro to Weaving and some of the other classes at that point. I think Tom's health has gotten to the point where he's no longer able to teach, but not only was he a master weaver with some beautiful products that he created, he was also a kind and patient teacher for me. So I went up to Harrisville, again, not knowing even what you called the different parts. People would ask me, do you have a 4-shaft or an 8-shaft or a 12-shaft? And I would look at them rather stupidly and say, I'm sorry, I don't know. What happens when you go to a weaving class is you're taught from the very beginning how to set everything up. This piece of material here on the wall is called a warping board. So one of the first things you do is learn how to wind a warp. And then as you progress through the classes, you create sample pieces that show how to do different parts of the weaving process, different patterns. There's a little tapestry work there. One of the things that amazed me immensely in that early project was that you can actually weave a continuous cylinder. See how I'm putting my hand through this? That was all done on the loom. And somebody thousands of years ago figured out these concepts and all these different patterns. So I took to it like a duck to water, as they say. Some people accuse me of being a ringer and maybe already knowing something about weaving when I got there. I'm not bragging, but I will say that it came very naturally to me. The sense of what you needed to do and how this needed to progress just made sense to me. And I've been fascinated ever since by the variety of things that you can do as you weave. So I think I'm going to just throw the shuttle a little bit and do a little bit of weaving while I continue to talk. One of the things that I've come to realize about handmade work, pretty much in any category that you might find it, is that we take inspiration from each other. And that though I may chiefly do cross stitch, there are ways in which weaving interacts or overlaps with the cross stitch work that I like to do. And the best way I can explain that is to have you think just a little bit about tapestry. Tapestry, actually, the definition of tapestry is a woven product where patterns are designed, are woven into the fabric as a part of the weaving process. Now you will see other tapestries or things that are called tapestries, like the Bayeux tapestry in France or the wonderful Plymouth tapestry that they're working on up in New England right now. But those are not true tapestries. Those are other forms of art, certainly just as completely wonderful as tapestry, but not true tapestry. So what happens with tapestry is that you are actually able to create figures or objects on the pieces that you weave. It's not quite the same process as what I'm doing here with just a floor loom, though you can make tapestries on a floor loom as well. I made this funny little piece as part of a class that I took in the summer of 2022, where I learned some of the basics of Navajo weaving. There's a wonderful teacher named Linda Teller-Pete. She and her sister have quite a reputation for their wonderful work in Navajo weaving. Her sister was ill the summer that I took the class, so I had an opportunity to study just with Linda. Now, in case you're wondering, this is a representation of my pet pig, Wilma Jean, who has now gone on to greater pig glory, but I wanted to immortalize her in some way in the tapestry that I was working on during the week. Now, this is 5 days of really hard weaving that you're looking at here, so don't think that tapestry is child's play. It's pretty difficult. And of course, the wonderful thing about how the Navajos weave is that the pattern is basically the same on the front and the back. Tapestry requires a much more slow and tedious process than just straight up weaving like I would be doing on the loom here. But how it interacts or overlaps with cross stitch is that you can create patterns in tapestry weaving that are very similar to what you would see in cross stitch or needlepoint. A word that I didn't know existed when I was young, but which we've all come to hear lately because of computers, is the word pixel, P-I-X-E-L. And that simply means that on a computer there's a grid, and each one of those little dots on the grid is called a pixel. Well, if you think about it, that's what cross stitch is. We take a design, which is a combination of a bunch of pixels, and we do different colored threads to create designs. Same thing with needlepoint. You're covering the corners instead of making X's, but you're still using that pixelated idea. Well, if you carry that over into weaving, there are, I think, at least two ways that you can use that process as part of weaving. The first is, of course, the tapestry, where I could count over a certain number of threads, and I would have the outline of the pig's head, and I would have the snout, and I would have the little tail, and those would all be pixels that I would weave on the loom rather than the stitching that you might be more familiar with. Another way that you could use cross stitch or needlepoint is that you can actually stitch designs onto the fabric that you have woven. I made a series of bookmarks a few years back, and then I took metallic threads and did designs on them and actually sold those as wonderful little artifacts or pieces from weaving. So I've been weaving about 15 years. After that first week with Tom Gypsum, I was able to come back home and kind of figure out my own loom. It's hard to find people to work on looms, so you really have to get to know your own loom, and you really have to know how to make it work. And sometimes if it breaks down, you have to figure out how to fix it, because there are not too many loom repair shops that you can find around. I brought a couple of other pieces that I've woven that I'm always very proud of. A few years back, a friend of mine who was being ordained an Episcopal priest asked me to create a clergy stole for her, and maybe I can stand up and show you what this looks like. Myself being a clergy person, I understand the use of these, so I designed this clergy stole, and I have a couple different colors actually that I used. And I know we can't get into the detail of it today, but this is an overshot pattern where the threads that go from left to right, which are called the weft threads, cover more than one warp thread, and you're able to create designs that way. Another use of those pixels that I was telling you about. So those are a couple clergy stoles that I made. And then one of my favorite projects that I've done through the years was this wonderful rainbow pattern that I did on the big loom. And I used that to create a bunch of pashminas. This is the last one that I have. And eventually this one will sell or be a gift to someone. It's about 8 feet long, and it's got a nice fringe on the end. And this is a piece that I did here on the loom. I wish you could come in and look at these and put your hands on them, but for now I can just kind of share with you those are some of the possibilities. So I can honestly say when I started thinking about having a shop, of course I wanted to bring my loom in. Let me just kind of scan around just a little bit so you can see what the loom looks like. Give you just a little bit of an idea of its size and what's involved here. I knew that I wanted to have my loom in the shop, but I wasn't at all sure that I knew enough about weaving to do anything more than that. But it has kind of come to pass, or come my way, that I now sell quite a bit of weaving supplies. People bring products in like looms or shuttles. These are the kind of shuttles we use. This is a big one that you have a little bobbin in the middle and you put your thread on there, and that's what goes back and forth and brings your weft threads into the weave. I also have a discount yarn room in the back, and the main reason I have that is for these great big cones of yarn or thread that weavers love. Because when we get ready to do a project, if our warp is 20, 30 yards long, we're going to use an awful lot of thread in the course of that, and we don't want to be dealing with little individual skeins of thread if we don't have to. So we love these big cones, and that's a wonderful, vibrant color that I have back in the discount yarn room. I try to get yarn into people's hands, and so it's $6 a pound if you go back in that little room, and it really is a treasure trove of colors and ideas. Not to mention the fact that I get to go back there whenever I want to start a project. So I've been working on a series of shawls here on the loom now. This is a twill pattern. You can kind of see the undulations of the twill. And you can see down here below, this is the part that I've already done, and it's rolled on. I started out with a blue weft, spent a little time with that, went on to a bit of magenta, and now I'm using this white weft. Sorry if I'm giving you vertigo by moving this around, but I'm not the best videographer yet. So, mentioning that though, somebody did in one of your comments ask me to try to broaden out my scope of my filming, and I hope this helps. I figured out once they mentioned it to me that maybe I could put the camera on the side instead of up and down, and maybe it'd be a little easier to see me. So think I'm going to do another row of weaving and just kind of finish out today's discussion by urging you to try things. Maybe you've looked at something, or through the years you've thought about, I wonder what would be involved if I learned how to do weaving, for instance. You don't really have to know what you're doing. I mean, I don't suggest you go in and spend thousands of dollars. You might find a place like a weaving center, which they exist all over the country. Go in and sit down on a loom someday and give it a try. Do something that somebody else has already set up and see what you think about it. Or if you can find a used loom, which there are many of them online and available around and about, get some folks, get involved with the guild or some folks that can help you learn. My local guild is the Weavers of Orlando. I was president of that group for 2 years during COVID, so I feel like I've kind of earned my stripes there. It was hard to keep a group like that together when we wanted to be in person, and we spent a lot of time on Zoom. I would just say branch out, and if there's something like this that you've always wanted to try, give it a shot. Take a look and see what might happen. You might find when you get involved that you just hate it. It's not for you. No reason to think about doing it. You tried that, it's time to move on to something else. But for some of us, just taking a little time and just trying something like this does provide an opportunity to explore something new that we never thought we would ever do, but which comes fairly naturally and is a lot of fun. So that's it for this version of the Legacy of Handmade Objects. I hope you're starting to think about roasting a turkey and maybe starting to get some plans together for travel and all the things that happen with the holidays. You'll see my shop evolve over the next few weeks as I start getting ready for the holidays and start planning the events that hopefully will bring the Legacy of Handmade Objects into the homes of many more people. So for now, have a great week. This is Gary Sly. Take care.